From pixel art to low poly to cel shaded, indie games will usually push their look in a direction that saves time while still looking cool. I always wanted my game to have a stylized look, something that would make it instantly recognizable. So I've been trying different visual styles lately. The first thing I tried is an outline shader, which is done through a post-process material. It goes something like this. We check the surrounding pixels and measure differences in depth and normals. If that difference exceeds a threshold, we fill that pixel with our outline color. This was pretty cool, but then I had an idea. What if we took away everything else and were just left with the outlines? Now we're talking. I'm not 100% sure this is the direction I'll be going in, but there are a lot of advantages to this style. The first is that it looks distinctive. A lot of people said the game looked kind of boring in its previous iteration, but I think this new look will help it stand out. It harkens back to games from the 80s such as Battlezone, but with a modern twist, with far higher poly counts and more effects. I think this will help the game stand out. Another advantage is the improved performance. Given that there is no need for any lighting or textures, the game should run better, especially on low-end hardware. The last and biggest advantage is that it saves time. Given that I'm doing all the assets myself, cutting out UVing and texturing stages ought to save a significant amount of time. Am I just lazy? Yes, but this frees up time to work on other aspects of the game. I understand that this would be a pretty divisive change, so I'll be interested in hearing people's thoughts in the comments. If you hate it, feel free to let me know. There are a few other changes I've been working on. The first is these pools of radioactive waste. They deal damage over time to enemies or players standing in them. I can use these in the level design to split up arenas and make it more challenging for the player to navigate the environment. I'm also working on giving some weapons knockback so that the player can push enemies into them. A very necessary change I've been working on is a checkpoint system. Before, when the player died, they would be sent back to the start of the level, but now they are sent back to their last checkpoint and get to keep any weapons they picked up. This should allow me to build longer levels without the player getting frustrated. Speaking of level design, I've been thinking a lot about how to add variety to enemy encounters. A large part of what makes encounters varied is how much information the player has. Before, all encounters were arenas that would spawn enemies. This meant that the player would have no information going into each fight and couldn't make decisions about their approach beforehand. This is okay for some fights to put the player on the back foot, but I don't want it to be every encounter. So now I have patrolling enemies in the level, which will aggro on the player if they catch sight of them. This will allow the player to size up fights before beginning them and choose their approach, or some encounters could be avoided altogether. I think this change will go a long way in adding variety to encounters and keeping players engaged. I wanted the spider enemy in my game to be a fairly threatening enemy. However, when playtesting, players would dump all of their missiles into it in order to stunlock it. This isn't necessarily a problem, but it kind of undermines the design of it being an intimidating enemy. So I've been testing ways to discourage this behaviour. I've been testing giving some enemies shields that would make them resistant to stuns until they've taken enough damage to break it. Or, as an alternative, I've also been testing giving the spider enemy a barrier they can drop down that would block player attacks. This is still something I'm trying to figure out, so more tweaking and testing is required. Going forward, there are a few things I want to focus on. The first thing I want to do is flesh out the level. I've added a lot of features and new assets to the game, and now I need to bring it all together with a longer level. I also want to work on the transition from menu to gameplay. At the moment it's just a quick fade in, but I want a less jarring transition, one that would ease players into the game and would fit well thematically. The last thing I want to focus on is tutorialization. Tutorials usually end up boring players, and this occurs in those critical moments of retention when they first start playing the game. To avoid this, I want to put players right into the action so they can learn through playing the game. Because of this, I will need to fit what tutorialization I can into the first level. So I'm going to work on tip screens for players when they first start playing the game that will introduce them to the different weapons and enemy types. So I think that covers everything. Subscribe to see where the game goes next. Be sure to let me know what you think of the new style in the comments. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.